Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Please let us know where you're joining us from in the chat. Test out those chat features while we're waiting for everyone to join us. We have 5 minutes until start time. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really exciting to see how many people are still joining us. Please tell us where you're joining us from in the chat, and we will start in 1 minute. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1 p.m. Let's get started. Welcome, welcome, and I hope everyone is nice and dry from this rainy afternoon. Thank you for participating in today's Land and Water Conservation Fund Local Agency Virtual Workshop. My name is Sochi Prak. I'm the manager for the Office of Grants and Local Services and National Park Service Unit. We help administer the federal NPS programs. We are delighted to bring you this webinar to review the Land and Water Conservation Fund, otherwise known as LWCF, grant application process with you all. The LWCF grant provides funding for the acquisition or development of land to create new outdoor recreation opportunities for the health and wellness of Californians. Since 1965, over 1,500 parks have been created or improved with LWCF assistance. We are very excited to start this new round of applications for the 2025 cycle with about 35.6 million available. During this webinar, we will review the LWCF local agency competitive process, including program requirements, the application guide, and the LWCF program timeline. We appreciate your participation in this workshop, and I'm really proud to have my team with me today. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, team. Katie Freeling, let's start with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Freeling, and I am the project officer for Southern California counties. It's been a pleasure working with many of you already, and I can't wait to receive your LWCF applications and bring some more park projects to life. So thanks for being here. I'll pass it over to Katie B.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Katie Bush. I'm the project officer for Northern California counties. I'm one of the presenters today too as well, and I look forward to helping teach you guys about the LWCF program. I'll pass it off to Lydia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lydia Willett, and I am another project officer. And I am the person who is assigned to the Central Region, and I will be helping those folks with technical assistance and other things. And I am also going to be a presenter today.
Hello, I'm Kristen Way. I'm an environmental scientist with our NPS team. I help review the post-election federal requirements, but for today, I will be helping support our project officers webinar. And I'll pass it over to Katie V.
Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Valaire. I am a senior environmental planner for the National Park Service Unit, and I also help with the post-election federal requirement review, and I'll be working behind the scenes.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Katie and Kristen, for helping us out today. And thank you, team. We have a great team that is here to help. And our primary goal is to provide you with a well-rounded review of the competitive process while also engaging in a dynamic conversation. So we encourage you to ask questions in the chat, or we can take some questions at the end of each section and again at the end of this webinar. So before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. This webinar is being recorded. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the LWCF webpage for future reference. A list of the links that we will be covering today was sent to you ahead of time in the email from lwcf@parks.ca.gov. That email is in the chat right now. We'll also be adding links to the chat as we go along. To help you follow along in this webinar, I'd like to point out a few of the Microsoft Teams features. Please use the chat feature to ask questions during this webinar, especially at the end of each for that section that we just covered. I promise you we have a comprehensive webinar, so each section will have its own opportunity to have a lot of questions answered. Okay, so you'll notice Kristen is circling the chat feature. For those of you that do not see a chat feature, try exiting and re-entering the workshop. And again, we will try to answer your questions directly in the chat in real time. We'll also review questions together at the end of each section we just covered to ensure we're sharing the same information with everyone. And chances are your questions, others are probably wondering the same thing, so please don't be afraid to ask. We will review any additional questions at the end of this webinar as well. We're here to help and we love answering questions. So you'll see I'm really emphasizing asking those questions because we truly do want to ensure that we're providing a well-rounded and comprehensive assistance to you all. If after the workshop you still have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email, a phone call, or schedule a Teams meeting with your specific project officer for your area. Okay, let's check out the website. So before we dive into the guide, let's go ahead and see what resources can be available on the website. This first page provides general information about the program. And from this main page, you'll see that there are several tabs such as the application process, grant administration, post-completion stewardship requirements, and much more. Today we'll be covering the application process, but it may be helpful to familiarize yourself with all the program information before applying, and it's all right here on this site. If you click on the application process tab, you'll see information about the current round of LWCF. You'll notice important information such as the application deadline, which is August 5th, 2025, followed by a link to Submittable. Next is a list of eligible applicants for this competitive cycle. We're going to go ahead and skip state agencies because that's not applicable today. And scrolling on down the list to the application workshops, you'll see the application guide that we're using for this cycle, as well as some helpful links like the fillable forms and technical assistant documents. As we move through this webinar, we will be going through the guide page by page. If you don't already have the guide with you for reference, we recommend pulling it up now to follow along, and the link is in the chat. We will let you know which page we are going as we move, but if you do get lost in the application, references can be found in the bottom right-hand corner of the slides that we are sharing. We'll point out the key information on each page as we move through as well. Hey, so there any questions about following along and using the resources? Okay, great. So today, our agenda, this is what we're going to be covering today. Eligibility for this program, who is eligible, the application process and timelines, all of the elements needed to craft an application known as checklist items. We'll also cover what to expect after your application is selected and moving forward through to the National Park Service for their review. And of course, we'll have plenty of time to review questions and of course, closing remarks. So now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Katie Bush, who will begin the review of the application guide.
All righty. So first things first, eligible applicants and funding. One last thing about the application guide. There's a couple of other sections, including the glossary that is located at the end of the application guide. It's got the defined terms that are throughout the guide in full capitals. You can reference those in the back of the guide. But now we'll go on to eligible applicants. So although the page mentions both local agency applicants and state agency applicants, we'll be focusing on local agency competitive programs today. So those local agency eligible applicants are cities, counties, federally recognized Native American tribes, joint powers authorities or JPAs, where all members are public agencies and the JPA was formed for the purpose of providing park and recreation areas, and recreation and park districts and special districts with the authority to acquire, operate, and maintain park and recreation areas. Note that agencies who have never administered a grant before, who have a record of failing to comply with grant provisions, or who have an unresolved conversion will not be eligible for this program. If you have any questions of if your agency has administered a grant with OGALs before, you can reach out to the project officer assigned to your county and we can double check for you. And we're happy to help out with that. So now we'll go on to page 9 of the guide. So this is match requirements. While there's no minimum grant request amount per project, the maximum grant request amount is $6 million. A match of at least 50% of the total project cost is required. So for example, a $10 million project may request up to $5 million in grant funding. Applicants can provide additional match, for example, a $10 million project providing $6 million in match funding would be requesting $4 million in grant funding and therefore would have a 60% match. Note that all match costs must be for eligible costs, and a list of eligible costs can be found in the guide on page 50 through 52, and we'll talk more about that a little later. Page 35, which we'll also review later today, discusses eligible match sources. In general, most federal sources are not eligible for match, while state, local, and private sources, including donations and volunteer work, are eligible. Awarded projects are provided grant funding through a reimbursement-only process, and applicants must be able to cash flow 100% of the total project cost before reimbursement. So real quick, we'll take a look at how the rate of reimbursement works. The total match for your project compared to the total project cost will inform the rate of reimbursement for your project. For example, a $10 million project with 50% match will have a reimbursement rate of 50%. The rate of reimbursement is the percentage that your agency receives with each submitted payment request. So if your project is chosen and funded, and you're coming in for a payment request, you might come in with $250,000 in eligible costs. If your reimbursement rate is 50%, the reimbursement amount for that payment would be $125,000. If your project is coming in for a match other than 50%, we recommend reviewing the rate of reimbursement match and grant request range guidance available on our webpage under the application process tab. You could scroll down to the application resources on that webpage. This document also includes a match calculation worksheet to determine the rate of reimbursement for your project. So let's take a quick pause for any questions that have come in so far. Let's see. Can 501c3 nonprofits apply if we have a partnership with a city or county, or does the city or county have to apply? It looks like Katie Freeling answered this one. Yeah, so the applicant has to be an eligible applicant. So in your case, then the city or county would need to apply, but the 501c3 can be a partner on the project, but the applicant has to be the city or county. We have a question about CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grant Fund, if those are eligible match funds. Yes, they are. They're one of the very few federal sources that are eligible for, one of the few federal sources that are eligible match funds. And I think we talk a little bit more about that a little later. Great. I think those are the two main questions. Cool. Okay. So we'll go ahead to eligible projects. So continuing on the bottom of page 9 in your guide is an introduction to eligible projects. Eligible project types are acquisition projects that result in a new recreation opportunity for the public within 3 years. Based on the scoring criteria, our program prioritizes acquisition projects. Development projects are also eligible. Please note that for development projects, applicants must own the project site land in fee simple. In order to be eligible, all acquisition or development projects must also meet at least one statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan or SCORP priority. We'll also discuss SCORP further when we get to checklist item 4, the project summary. Note that combination projects involving both acquisition and development are not eligible for this program. If you did want to do a combination project, you could apply for the ORLIP program, which we have more workshops and information about that also on our website. But LWCF is only acquisition or development. Let's turn to page 10 and look at an example of an eligible acquisition project, or a couple examples. Eligible acquisition projects include purchasing property to create a new park, expanding a park, and creating a buffer or view shed for an existing park. Acquisitions must result in a new recreation opportunity for the public within 3 years after the completion of the acquisition. Since combination projects are not eligible, this means the applicant must propose to either have a plan in place, including an expected funding source to develop the land within 3 years of acquisition, or acquire land that already has a recreation feature on the property that will immediately provide a recreational opportunity, such as land with trails or a walkable fire road, or land that will serve as a buffer or view shed for an existing park. So spoiler alert, when we get to the project selection criteria, you'll see how land that already has a recreation feature ready for the public's use will gain more points. If you have any specific questions about your possible acquisition that you're interested in applying for funding for, you can reach out to your assigned National Park Service Grants project officer, and we can talk more of the details with you about that. And now we'll go take a look at page 11 to look at some examples of eligible development projects. For this program, development must be for outdoor recreation. Indoor recreation structures such as community centers are not eligible. Examples of eligible projects include constructing new athletic fields and courts, gardens, dog parks, open spaces, outdoor fitness equipment, playgrounds, trails, and more. A popular one that I've been hearing lately is also pools. Those are eligible. Applicants are in no way limited to the items included on page 11 of the guide, as long as the proposed feature is for outdoor recreation, so you can get creative. Renovation of outdoor recreation items and construction of major support amenities such as parking lots and restrooms are also eligible in this program. So now we'll skip ahead a little bit in the guide to look at the eligibility card on page 16 of the guide. The eligibility card is designed to ensure that applicants are aware of all the eligibility requirements for this program. If any of your answers to any of these are no, then your project is not eligible for land and water. So we'll go through these one at a time. So the first one talks about the SCORP priorities. Those are located on the LWCF webpage under the Application Resources heading, as well as the Parks for California website. And the link to both of those are in the chat, and we'll talk more about SCORP in the project summary section a little later on today. Number 2 is, will the applicant become the landowner through an acquisition, or for development projects, does the applicant own the land at time of application? Does the applicant understand that the entire park be placed within the LWCF boundary map will be protected, operated, and maintained according to the post-completion park stewardship requirements in perpetuity? Can all required documents and responses be submitted by the deadline? And can the CEQA analysis be completed no later than 60 days after the application deadline? Does the applicant understand that they must cash flow the entire project, as LWCF is a reimbursement-only program? Will the project be completed within 5 years once approved? And number 7 is, does the applicant understand that no work can occur within the project footprint from application submittal until final NPS approval? So as you're going through this card, if thinking about your project, if you answer no to any of these questions, then that project is ineligible, and we recommend regrouping to make the necessary adjustments or propose a different project that can meet these requirements. And we'll talk more details about many of these requirements throughout this workshop. Okay, so now let's take a look and see if there's any questions. It looks like there's been a good number coming in. So from David, it says, eligibility. Do you have to be a previous OGALS awardee or actually closed a grant agreement through OGALS? Yes, it's based on the agency though. So like if the person who's writing the application hasn't closed a grant, that's okay. The agency just has to. Katie Freeling, you want to pitch in?
Yeah, so you don't have to have experience administering a grant with OGALS as long as you have a track record of administering grants successfully with other programs, and there'll be an opportunity to share that within the application.
Awesome. Great. Okay, and then we are a park and rec district who maintain city-owned properties. Would we be able to apply for city-owned properties? the landowner needs to apply. So that would be the city would need to apply for that particular project. Which indoor amenities are eligible? It cut out on my end. Indoor recreation amenities are not eligible for this program. It's all just outdoor recreation. But there are, you can fund pools with this program. If depending on where your location is, if you can justify a reason for an indoor pool, that would be pretty much the one example. But yeah, it's all for outdoor recreation. So indoor amenities like community centers are not eligible. Go ahead, Katie.
And also indoor facilities that directly support outdoor recreation. So like restrooms or a visitor center or park entrance kiosk could also be eligible under LWCF. But if you have questions about if an indoor facility would be eligible, you can reach out to your project officer.
Yeah. All right. We have a question, the LWCF email, would ICDBG funds be considered eligible as well? This is Indian Community Development Block Grant. That I'm not sure of. If you can check the legislation that created that grant, it should list in there specifically if it is a grant that can be used as match for the LWCF program. If it doesn't say that, then it would not be eligible. But you can also email your project officer and we can look more into that for you. Okay, so question from Juliana, 3 years or 5 years to number 6? Oh, I see now. Okay. Yeah, so it should be 5 years under number 6. It says 3 currently. But yeah, you have up to 5 years to complete your project rather than 3. Brittany says, our project would consist of replacing the lights for safety purposes for 4 parks within our city. Would this be a covered project? So all the project work has to be taking place at one park. So if you were replacing the lights at one park, that would be fine. But since this is for 4 different parks, that would not be an eligible project for this program. For line 7, when will NPS approvals be released for 2025 applications? That depends. We'll talk more about the timeline in our next section, so we'll come back to that one. Stephen says, so CEQA has to be filed with the county clerk within 60 days. Anyone want to pitch in about that one?
Let's give that to Kristen.
All right.
Hi, yes, your NOD or NOE should be filed within 60 days of the application deadline. So if CEQA is not complete, please put a placeholder letter that puts the next steps and includes that deadline. If you have any more questions, though, please feel free to reach out to me by email, and I can put that in the chat later.
All right, and then it looks like last one here is from, okay, so our project is owned by the county. The Public Works Agency of the county is leading the project. However, the project is operated and managed by the County Parks Department. Would it be okay for the Public Works to apply, or would the Parks Department need to apply? The agency that owns the property will need to apply. So it would be the county in this case, since they own the property. Stephen's asking, NEPA is not required. We will talk more about that I think in a little bit here. Lydia, go ahead.
Yeah, what I want to say is yes to the Public Works because they work for the county. So the county owns the property. So therefore, the Parks Department can apply, or the Public Works, you guys would be the contacts of the application for the county.
Okay, perfect.
That's all I want.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks for clarifying. All right. So cool. We'll get back to the NEPA requirement when we get to our CEQA section here. So let's see. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lydia, and she's going to be telling us more about the application process and timeline.
Okay, thanks, Katie. All right, we're gonna, like she said, we're gonna now talk about the process and the application process and timeline, and that can be referenced on pages 12 to 14 and of your application guide. But for the purposes of this workshop, we are going to focus on the timeline table found on page 14. Let's turn there now, which is on your screen. And LWCF includes multiple layers of reviews, so applicants should plan for approximately a 2 to 3 year period from the date of application, which is August 2025, until the grant is fully executed and funds are obligated. Please take this timeline into consideration when planning your project timeline and estimating costs. So now let's walk through the process step by step. Now, through August 2025, our team will be available to provide application technical assistance. As previously stated, local agency applications for this round are due August 5th, 2025, before 5:00 p.m. Applications must be submitted online through Submittable. Applications submitted by mail and/or requests to submit applications after the deadline will not be accepted. The OGALS MPS unit will take approximately 6 months to review these applications and make selections. Decisions will be announced in spring of 2026. Selected projects will then enter the post-selection federal requirements process. This includes Section 106 and NEPA pathways, which can take up to a year, sometimes longer, to complete based on your project's complexity. Please be aware that once an LWCF application is submitted, the site is subject to the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and Section 106 approval. So this means no groundbreaking activities can happen, even work that's not funded by LWCF within the project site footprint until these federal requirements are complete. Once the federal requirements are complete, OGALS will submit the final federal package to MPS for review and approval. This step can take anywhere from 2 to 6 months. The LWCF award is only made after the application and post-election federal requirements are approved by MPS. Once MPS awards the project, OGALS will then draft and issue a contract to the awardee. Once the contract is signed by both parties, the applicant officially becomes a grantee. As you can see, the timing varies based on the time it takes for applicants to complete the federal requirements. The pace at which the project moves to MPS for review is within your control. Consider this when planning your project timelines. And now that we're going to move into the grant performance period. So on page 15, it covers basic information regarding the grant performance period. The grant performance period begins on the official MPS approval date. Both acquisition and development projects will have up to 5 years from the start of the grant performance period to complete the project. Eligible planning costs may be incurred up to 3 years before the application is approved by MPS. And we'll go over eligible pre-award planning costs later in the workshop. Reimbursement requests can be submitted to OGALS after MPS approves the project and the state contract is executed. Note that submitting an application does not guarantee funding. Funding is not guaranteed until MPS has approved the project, and your MPS grant project officer will notify you when MPS approves the project. So are there any questions about timelines and performance period? I do see. Okay, so David is asking, during the 2 to 3 period to obligate funds, what happens if there are updates made to the guidelines? How does this affect the grant award? The guidelines. Once the application closes, if you're speaking of these guidelines, they're not going to change after the fact, if I understand what you're asking. So unless somebody else has a comment on this question, or
Hi, Sochi here. Guidelines should not change eligibility, but perhaps provide more guidance on what certain things mean. Um, there there are, just full disclosure, there are discussions right now to update the Orla guidelines. I don't foresee them happening for LWCF at this point.
but it shouldn't affect the grant award, I would not think, David.
No.
So cheap, right? Yeah, it
Correct,
wouldn't affect
correct.
your funding. Once your funding is secured by the notice of award, meaning that when we give you your start performance grant performance date, your funding is secured to your project. We might ask for a variation of a document maybe, or something. Those things can kind of change, but it will not affect your funding. And then Dave is asking, would the ground disturbance preclude an ongoing park rehabilitation project scheduled for this year? Yeah, if it's in the footprint of the grant project that you're requesting to fund, you cannot have any previous ground disturbance before you receive or complete all your post-selection federal requirements approval, or you get approval for that. And which that's what we were talking about, and that usually doesn't come until you have the beginning of your grant performance year period date. Stephen, so the project construction may not begin for a couple of years from August. Yeah, basically that's, or 3 years it could, just depending on how fast you go through the post-selection federal requirements. That's really going to gauge how fast you get your funding. But definitely once we notify you that you have been selected and you move into the post-selection federal, period, like we say, we gauge that once that clock starts ticking, it's about a year to complete that process, but it can take longer. And if you have specific questions too, you can reach out to Katie Valaire, and she's our expert on that, and she could probably help you guide you in like timelines on what it might take for your specific site too. Okay. Anybody want to add? Katie, do you want to add anything to that, or? Because that's really what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so. Typically the ground disturbance prohibition before your project is the reason they do that is because for Section 106, if there is a historic property or an archaeological site that's destroyed before we do our review, it's an issue. So I think you should really reach out to your NPS project officer. It'll depend on your project. So if you have a phased project, please reach out to your project officer and we could discuss it.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so moving on, we're going to go to page 17 for the application packet and checklist. So as previously mentioned, applications will be submitted through the online platform Submittable. You'll receive an email after this workshop with the link. The local agency competitive column shows that checklist items 1 and 2 and 4 through 11 are required for all local agency applicants. Additionally, items 12 and 13 are only required for acquisition projects, and then items 14 and 15 are only required for development projects. If a checklist item is pending, provide a placeholder stating what the current status, next step, and estimated date of completion. Checklist item 5 cannot have a placeholder. All project selection criteria must be submitted by August 5th application deadline. Also, please note the second black bullet at the top of the page. Only send requested checklist items. Do not send supplemental items such as letters of support. These items will not be reviewed. We do understand it takes time to get these letters, so please focus on planning instead focus on planning the project. All projects are reviewed based on the merits of the project using the project selection criteria only. On page 18, it has a brief introduction to the application form. So let's turn to page 19 now and look at the form itself, which is checklist item number 1. A fillable version of this form is available on the LWCF webpage. A link is also now available in the chat to the forms. Here on the form, you can see there are fillable boxes for information regarding the project and applicant. The maximum grant request amount can be up to $6 million. For applicants that wish to include a grant request range, list a minimum grant request amount if willing to accept less than the maximum stated. This is typically used when selecting the last couple of projects to fund, so the amount funded is equal to the amount available. Applicants that choose to include a range must be able to complete the full project scope, regardless of how much grant funding is ultimately awarded. If OGALS awards the minimum grant amount, the agency must still complete the full scope. The authorized representative indicated in the checklist item number 2, authorizing resolution, signs this form and is considered the approver for the application. So now it's a good transition for me to pass it back over to Katie Freeling, and she is going to talk about checklist item number 2, authorizing resolution. Please continue also to put questions in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Lydia. All right,
You're
moving
welcome.
on. Page 20 provides information on checklist item number 2, the authorizing resolution. The authorizing resolution shows that the applicant's governing body approves of submitting the application and provides a point position to review and approve the application documents. Please do not change the language. However, an applicant can reformat the resolution if needed. The next page, page 21, includes the authorizing resolution language. For provision number 6 in the resolution, note that a position title is required here, not a person's name. This position will also be responsible for signing payment requests, status reports, and other signed documents related to the project. It is important to indicate a title instead of a person's name, so if that person moved into a different position or left the agency, additional paperwork will not be required to identify a new authorized representative. Pages 22 to 23 cover checklist item number 3, the certification letter for state agencies. This checklist item is not applicable for local agency applicants like you, so we'll jump to page 24 to review checklist item number 4. Checklist item number 4 is the project summary. The project summary is not scored. However, responses may help determine eligibility for the Land Water Conservation Fund program. These responses will be entered directly into Submittable. The checklist item has 2 parts. The first part, OGALS will use to determine the project scope through a brief summary up to 500 words. All recreation features and major support amenities proposed for this project should be included in the summary. For the second part, applicants will identify the applicable SCORP priority or priorities for this project and provide a brief description of how the project will meet that priority or priorities. The 2021 to 2025 SCORP establishes the current priorities. Remember, in order to be eligible, projects must meet at least one SCORP priority. The priorities can be found under Application Resources on the LWCF application webpage. We provided a link for the current SCORP priorities a little bit earlier, and it is available in the chat. The SCORP priorities are new park access, which includes creating and expanding parks in communities that lack sufficient park space and acquiring land in natural areas to expand or create new regional parks and open space recreational areas. Number 2, multi-use parks designed for all age groups in new and existing parks, which includes designing and constructing recreation features that bring families together and include multi-generational recreation. Number 3, health design goals for new or existing parks, which includes community-based planning strategies that specifically include public health as a goal. Number 4, safety and beautification for new or existing parks, which includes enhancements that make the park appear more welcoming and support longer hours of use. And number 5, preservation, which includes placing new land under LWCF protection. Most projects will meet at least one of these priorities, but don't panic if your project does not meet all of them. We encourage you to visit parksforcalifornia.org to read the full SCORP report and learn more about California's current outdoor recreation plan. All right, so we're going to pause briefly for any questions. Looks like there's no new questions in the chat, so we'll keep chugging along. On page 25, you'll find checklist item number 5, project selection criteria. There are 8 project selection criteria. 7 of these criteria are scored for a total of 100 possible points. Points are gained in the scoring process, and everyone starts with 0. The guidance for each criteria includes a scoring rubric to show applicants exactly what must be done to gain maximum points. We recommend using the criteria and accompanying rubrics to conceptualize a project that scores as many points as possible. Projects that do so are more likely to be competitive. Keep in mind that your criteria of responses will be compared to other statewide applications. This is really your opportunity to tell your story. Be thorough in your responses and make sure it is clear how the project will address each of the criteria. Project selection criteria number 1 is unmet need and begins on page 26. Applicants will answer either A and B if applying for an acquisition project, or C and D if applying for a development project. At the top of the page, you'll see that a project that addresses more than one SCORP priority and unmet need will rank higher in this criterion. The unmet need should show a substantial need compared to other statewide applicants. For acquisitions, A and B request information on why the acquisition is a high priority, both based on availability of the land and the need for park space within the community being served. In your response, explain how the project will serve current and future generations of the region, citywide public, or neighborhood residents. As you can see, the scoring rubric will award the most points to high priority acquisitions compared to other statewide applications submitted for this round of funding. For development projects, questions C and D request information on why this project is a high priority for the community served and what effect a failure to fund the project would have on residents. Again, the reviewers will use the responses to questions C and D to rank the project against other statewide applications, and will use the scoring rubric on page 27 to award the most points to a high priority development project. Project selection criteria number 2 is type of project and can also be referenced on page 27. For this criteria, Applicants will identify which type of project they're applying for. Acquisition to create a new park will receive 10 points. Development projects to create a new park will receive 8 points. Acquisitions to expand an existing park will receive 6 points. And development projects that improve an existing park will receive 4 points. Are there any questions about the first two criteria? Looks like we have a couple. Let's see here. Stephen asked, is a resolution due 60 days from the deadline? So for all checklist items that aren't related to the project selection criteria, you can submit a placeholder if it's not available by the deadline. So what that placeholder would look like is a document sharing the current status of that element. So for this example, the resolution, and when that's anticipated to be complete and submitted to our office. All right, if you have any other questions about what we've covered so far, go ahead and put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Bush to continue with project selection criteria 3 and 4.
All righty. So, project selection criteria 3 is new acreage placed under LWCF protection, and that begins on page 28 of the guide. As part of the Land and Water Program, parks that are funded must place the entire park acreage under LWCF protection, including parkland that is not part of the project footprint. This means the land must remain a park for outdoor recreation use forever. Only acreage that is not currently under LWCF protection counts for this criterion. And because Land and Water has been funding projects since 1965, it's very possible that a park that you might be renovating might actually already be under LWCF protection. So make sure you do your research in your agency's files to accurately report the new acreage that will be placed under protection. If you're unsure whether your project site is already under LWCF protection, you can reach out to your project officer for your county, and we can check on our end too to see if there were any projects funded at that particular site. So for criterion 3, the scoring rubric shows that projects that place new acreage under LWCF protection receive 10 points. If a park is already under LWCF protection from a previous LWCF grant, but the project is also considered a high priority based on criteria 1, the application will receive 5 points. If the entire park is already under LWCF protection from a previous LWCF grant and will not be considered a high priority project per the response to criteria 1, the application will receive 0 points. At the bottom of page 28, the ranked percentage of new acreage indicates that projects can receive up to 5 additional points for parks placing the most acres under new LWCF protection compared to all statewide applications received. For example, in a round where 5 applications are submitted, if 3 applications will each place 100 acres under LWCF protection, all 3 applicants will receive the extra 5 points. The application within this same round that protects 30 acres will receive 3 points, and the application already under LWCF protection will receive 0 points. Project selection criteria number 4 is park deficient or economically disadvantaged area, and that's on page 29 of the guide. Criteria 4 requires both the park access and community fact finder report. This step provides data on park deficient and/or economically disadvantaged areas. Both of these reports are directly linked in the online application and are accessible from the LWCF webpage. We're also dropping the links to both of these reporting tools in the chat for you to take a look at on your computer. The Community Fact Finder report analyzes the half-mile radius around the park to show whether the project meets criteria 4.1a, which is a new park in an area where no other parks exist, or 1B, a median household income that is less than $67,278. So this dollar amount, along with a couple of other percentages that I'm going to be referencing in a little bit, are all listed on the LWCF webpage too. So if you're not able to write it down fast enough, we'll show you where that's at. So the Park Access Tool report will show whether the park or whether the project meets 2A, more than the state average of 21% of residents living further than a half mile from the park, or 2B, more than 61% of residents living in areas with less than 3 acres of parkland per 1,000 people. So like I said, if you need to reference these numbers again later while you're working on your application, they are on the LWCF webpage. So you'll be inputting data from these reports into this selection criteria on the online application, which is submittable, as well as uploading the actual reports under checklist item 11. These reports are required as part of your application in that checklist item 11. Page 42 in the application guide has additional instructions on pulling these reports and uploading them to submittable. We'll also do a little demo here to show you how that works. But when you're working on your application, if you need additional help or a refresher, there is also a how-to video on the LWCF webpage that will show you step-by-step how to generate these reports. Okay, so we're going to do the demo right now of the Community Fact Finder report. So you can go to the Parks for California website, which is parksforcalifornia.org, which is where we're at right now. It's also in the chat. In the upper right corner, you can click Park Access, and it'll bring down a menu. And then in the menu, select Statewide Parks Program Community Fact Finder. In the next screen that opens up, you'll be entering the project address or the project name or the latitude and longitude for projects that don't have an address. So we'll use Capitol Park here in Sacramento as an example. One cool thing about this tool is that you can use it to determine possible locations for future parks that will serve disadvantaged communities. To see the disadvantaged community layer, you can go to the lower right corner of the map where there's this layer button and click disadvantaged communities. You'll see a bunch more colors show up to indicate disadvantaged community and severely disadvantaged community. You can move the pin anywhere within the park boundary. Just make sure that it is within the park and not outside of the park. And you can see how the data on the left side of the screen changes as the pin moves around the park. So once you find a good spot for the pin, you can click the orange Download XLSX report to download the report onto your computer. And then we'll take a look at it. There it is. So for this example, the parks per 1,000 people is 7.14, which would be the number entered into submittable. Note for criteria 1A, no parks within the half-mile area radius is not met. However, criteria 1B, which is the median household income, is $58,024, which is less than the $67,278. And so this park would meet goal 1B. When you get to checklist item 11, you'll upload this report into submittable. The statistics shown on the Community Fact Finder report must match the data you enter into submittable for project selection criteria 4, 1A, and 1B, and only one Community Fact Finder report will be accepted per application. If no report is submitted or the pin is located outside the project boundary, we will generate a new report and place the pin at the center of the park, which may affect your criteria score for your park. So now we'll go through the steps real quick to generate a park access tool report, which the information for this is on page 42 of the guide, but we'll just do a screen demo here. So we'll go to the link shown in the guide on page 42, which is parksforcalifornia.org/parkaccess. Then you'll select the city or county where the project will be located. You can pick the city or the county. In this case, we're going to use the city of Sacramento. And then you'll click Download XLSX Report. As with the Community Fact Finder report, you will pull the numbers from the Park Access Tool report for project selection criteria 4, 2, A, and B. For example, in this report, for 2A, 8% of residents are living further than a half mile from a park. This is less than the state average of 61%, so no points will be received for 2A. For 2B, 37% of residents live in areas with less than 3 acres of park space per 1,000 residents. This is also less than the state average of 61%, so the application earns no points for criteria 4, 2, A, and B. Note that although neither response for goal 2 will qualify for points, both these numbers must be included in the submittable application, and this report must be uploaded under checklist item 11. Again, the statistics shown on the Park Access Tool report must be the same on your application for these criteria, and only one Park Access Tool report will be accepted per application. So now we'll go to the bottom of page 29 in the application guide and take a look at the scoring rubric for this section. So from the sample reports we just pulled, one goal was met through the 2 reports, so this project would score 10 points. If the median household income had been above the threshold, then none of the 4 goals would be met and it would score 0 points. 2 or more goals between the 2 reports receive 15 points total. Remember to upload both reports, one Community Fact Finder report and one Park Access Tool report with the application. All right, so now we'll take a quick pause for questions about the Community Fact Finder and Park Access report. Let me scroll back a little bit. Okay, so given the priority in points to acquisition projects, how much funding historically has gone to improvement of existing parks? Sochi, do you want to go ahead?
Hi. Yes, 2 things I want to say. One, there is a link on our website for being able to view all of our awardees, and it gives you the details on how much was given, who the awardee was, and what the project was and type. Yes, projects are given to those that are simply just enhancements to a park. So, for instance, there was a grant for just over $2,000 for River Park Canyon to include a garden, and it was as simple as that. So it really depends. While you don't see all the points in one category, you may be able to make up for it in other categories, and of course, how competitive your application is. So there is opportunity all around. And I encourage you to speak to your project officers to see some of those, see how those projects can fit in.
Awesome. Thanks, Sochi. Mary asks, does this mean that there can be no buildings or rec centers built? When you submit your application, you can include on your site plan proposed, future buildings, rec centers, things like that, and we'll take that into account. There is a process for buildings and things related to not outdoor recreation to allow those buildings in park sites. But that'll be something that you can talk more about your project officer with for those specifics. But there is a process for that. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, cool. I think those are all the questions we have so far. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Lydia to take us through project selection criteria 5 and 6. Unless we want to do a 10-minute break, it looks like. Good for a break?
Yes, please. 10
Okay.
minutes break.
All right, 10-minute
That's
break.
right.
We'll see you all at 2:10.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Hopefully we're all back from our break. We'll give everybody a few seconds to get in back. So, okay. So now we're going to move on to project selection criteria number 5, population served. That is found on page 30 in our guide. Population served focuses on the benefits the project will provide to older adults, at-risk youth, and or population or persons with disabilities. For this criteria, you should think about recreation features that can be incorporated into the park for each user group and ask for their input. Applicants will provide brief responses for how the project will benefit each group. These responses should include information on how the project design will meet the needs of these groups. It should be a qualitative description rather than a quantitative information. If the project is an acquisition and the specific facility development plans are pending, explain how members of the underserved population will be involved in future development plans. Projects will receive 15 points if older adults, at-risk youth, and persons with disabilities will all clearly benefit from this project. Using bullet points with information specific to each group in your responses can help make it clear that you are addressing all groups of people. If none of these underserved population groups will benefit or no information was provided, the project will receive 0 points for this criterion. Moving on to project selection criteria number 6, public input, which is also on page 30. Criteria 6 asks applicants to describe the public input process for this park project within the last 5 years leading up to the application deadline. To qualify for full points, the public input process must have occurred within the 5 years before the application deadline. The time frame for this round is between August 5th, 2020 and August 5th, 2025. It must be clear that the public input gathered is specific to this project. Projects that will benefit all 3 underserved populations will receive 15 points. Projects that will benefit 2 underserved populations will receive 10 points. And projects that will benefit 1 underserved population will receive 5 points. And if the project will benefit none of the underserved populations or no information was provided, the project will receive 0 points. So do we have any questions? Did we answer?
I think we're up to date on all the questions.
Thank you, Katie. Okay. So moving on to criterion 7, project readiness, which is on page 31 of the application guide. Acquisition project applicants will fill out a chart in Submittable and provide either a completion date for both the Yellow Book appraisal and willing seller letter or an estimated completion date. Note that 5 points will be received for each item completed before the application due date. 5 more points will be awarded to acquisitions that are ready for recreation immediately upon the close of escrow. Acquisitions that have the appraisal and agreement ready and do not require development will score up to 15 points. This does not mean that additional improvements can't be planned for the site. However, projects that have at least 1 feature available, such as a fire road that can be used as a trail, or projects that will provide a buffer to a current park, will receive these additional 5 points. Development project applicants will fill out a chart in Submittable and provide either a date completed for each item or an estimated completion date. 2 points will be received for each completed item for a maximum of 10 points. We understand that often applicants do not have permits or bid packages prepared at this stage, and timelines may be fluid. Don't let that deter you from applying for this program. If you have questions or concerns, please reach out to your county assigned MPS grants project officer. Moving on to project selection criteria 8. applicants' eligibility, which is found on page 32 in the application guide. This criteria is not scored. However, answers may affect project eligibility. Applicants should answer either A or B. Those who have administered a grant with OGALs within the last 15 years should respond to A. Applicants who have not administered a grant with OGALs before should respond to B to describe any previous funding experience. Applicants who have never administered a grant before, who have a record of failing to comply with grant provisions, or who have unresolved conversion will not be eligible for this program. Project selection criteria number 8 marks the end of checklist item number 5. As a reminder, all of the project selection criteria responses must be submitted by the deadline of August 5th, 2025. No additional information or responses will be accepted after the deadline for these criteria. So if we have any questions, we do not. All right, I'm now going to hand it back over to Katie Freeling, who's going to review the detailed budget narrative.
Awesome. Thank you, Lydia. Okay. Checklist item number 6 is the detailed budget narrative, which starts on page 33. The detailed budget narrative is an Excel workbook. A template will be linked directly to the submittable application and is available on our website for you to download and complete. Note, this budget narrative is new and includes revised guidance from NPS. On the LWCF webpage, under the Application Process tab, scroll down to Fillable LWCF application forms. Here, you'll see the budget narrative is number 4 on the list, and you can click to download it. You will also find the budget narrative how-to video. Watch this video for step-by-step guidance on how to complete this application element. NPS has new budget guidelines, so it's essential to watch this video to ensure you complete the budget narrative correctly. And of course, if you need further technical assistance filling out the budget narrative, your NPS grants project officers are always here to support you. All right, so moving on, let's resume on page 25 of the guide to review eligible match in further detail. It's important for all applicants to understand that federal funds are not eligible to be used for LWCF match, with a couple of exceptions. A federal grant program that has statutory language, including that specifically allows it to be used as match for LWCF, for example, Community Development Block Grants and Fixing America's Surface Transportation FAST Act, and Recreation Trail Programs funds. If your project has federal funding involved and you're not sure if it's eligible, please reach out to your project officer to discuss it further. Most of the time, if other federal funding is involved, the project will not be eligible for LWCF. State, local, and private sources are eligible, and page 35 includes some examples. For acquisition projects, donated land for match must be donated within the project performance period and also meet the Uniform Appraisal Standards for Federal Land Acquisitions, also known as UASFLA or Yellow Book Standards, to determine the value of the donation. Funding required by law is also not eligible for match, and funding contributions with restrictions to how the site can be used may impact eligibility as well. For example, conservation easements could be an issue depending on the agreement language. If you have questions, again, reach out to your NPS unit project officer. Page 36 includes more detailed information on how to calculate the value of donations used as match. We recommend applicants review this page in more detail and reach out with any questions. For this workshop, we'll skip over this page and jump over to the eligible and ineligible costs section on page 50 of the application guide. On page 50, you'll see some examples of eligible acquisition costs. The cost of land itself, relocation costs, employee services, and grant administration. Please note on the left-hand columns, incidental costs involved in acquisition, such as title reports and appraisal fees, are not eligible. Pages 51 and 52 cover eligible development costs. Pre-award planning costs are eligible and are not limited to a specific percentage of the grant. Eligible pre-award costs include planning documents, permits, CEQA NEPA, Section 106, employee services, and project administration. Note that grant writing is not an eligible cost. Remember that to be eligible for reimbursement, these pre-award costs must be included and marked in the pre-award column on the detailed budget narrative. Again, these must be incurred no earlier than 3 years from the expected NPS approval. And you'll also note that all of these pre-award costs are for planning or design or pre-award inspection. Pre-award development or construction costs are not eligible and may render the project ineligible. Eligible construction costs during the performance period include site prep and grading, materials and equipment, construction management, employee services, and project/grant administration. All of these costs must be incurred after NPS approval. Ground disturbance before receiving NPS approval will jeopardize the grant funding. Ineligible costs can be referenced on page 53. This page includes examples of ineligible costs, such as costs incurred outside the grant performance period, overhead business expenses such as utilities, mortgage, or rent, costs for work outside the park site boundaries, fundraising, food, grant writing, programming costs, operation and maintenance costs, and other items not related directly to the grant project. Note that public art, security cameras, sound systems, televisions, video equipment, and electrical vehicle charging stations are also ineligible. These are common items we see in LWCF applications that must be removed due to ineligibility. Another common ineligible cost are elements that are not permanent to the park, such as soccer goals. So as a general rule of thumb, if you were to flip the park upside down, anything that would fall off of the park is ineligible. Please keep in mind that costs ineligible for reimbursement are also ineligible as match. Match may only include items that are also eligible for the LWCF program. All right, that reviews eligible match and costs. Do we have any questions on that section? All right, doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat, so I am going to turn it over to Katie Bush, who will take us through the next checklist items.
Alrighty. So now we're going to go through checklist items 7 through 10, which is CEQA, location map, LWCF boundary map, and photos. So now we're on page 37 of the application guide to talk about checklist item number 7, CEQA requirements. Plan to have CEQA complete either by the application deadline or no later than the end of November 2025, which is 3 months after the application deadline. CEQA analysis must cover the project's site-specific grant scope. For acquisition projects, the environmental review needs to include the assessor parcel number to be acquired. Typically, we see notice of exemptions as the appropriate documentation for acquisition projects. Including a future construction project is not needed because the LWCF project is for acquisition only. For development projects, the environmental review must include analysis sufficient for the construction of the LWCF project scope elements. If CEQA is based off of a general or master plan rather than a site-specific analysis, if the application is recommended for funding, NPS will require additional site-specific analysis to satisfy NEPA. This could include the preparation of a biological report or an addendum to the CEQA document to ensure project-specific analyses were done. Next, you will file the appropriate CEQA documents with the state clearinghouse, and you'll be providing the CEQA compliance certification form, which is found on page 38 of the guide and on the LWCF webpage under the fillable LWCF forms number 5 on the list. We've provided a link in the chat as well. You'll also need to include the final notice of exemption or notice of determination filed and stamped by the county clerk and posted to the state clearinghouse. If the project required an initial study, negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration, or EIR, please upload all documents and appendices for a complete CEQA package for our review. The bottom of the form has a place for the authorized representative identified in the authorizing resolution to sign. If CEQA is not complete, please submit a placeholder stating the current status, next steps, and estimated date of completion. Also note, CEQA must be complete before the project can be submitted to NPS for review. Checklist item number 8 is project location maps. Applicants will upload a map showing highway and street access to the project site. You can use Google Maps to create this, just like what you're seeing on the screen here. Pretty straightforward. Checklist item number 9 is the LWCF boundary map. This checklist begins on page 39 of the guide. The LWCF boundary map is required for all projects and shows the park area that will be protected in perpetuity for outdoor recreation purposes only. The LWCF checklist is also available on the LWCF webpage under fillable LWCF forms. It's number 6 on that list. We've also provided a link in the chat for your reference. Your LWCF boundary map should look similar to the sample at the bottom of the checklist on page 41 and be drafted on a document no larger than 11 by 17 inches. The document will be submitted electronically, but will be printed by NPS and should fit on an 11 by 17 inch page. If you have any questions about the boundary map, please reach out to the NPS Grants Project Officer assigned to your county and we can help you out. Checklist item 10 is the photos of the project site. Upload no more than 10 high-quality photos of the project site and its surrounding area. Please include information on the pictures in the file name. For example, files could be named site photo from the corner of X and Y streets. This will help orient the reviewer while we're reviewing your application. We've already discussed the Community Fact Finder and Park Access Tool reports, but checklist item number 11 is where you'll be uploading those reports. That's at the bottom of page 42 in your guide. As a reminder, make sure you upload both of these reports in Submittable under checklist item 11. Now we'll move along to checklist items that are specific to certain types of projects, starting with acquisition. Let me check if we have any questions first, though. It looks like Angela was asking about admin fees for acquisition, and then clarified, is only the cost of purchase allowed or admin fees for research and working with broker seller eligible? Looks like Katie answered, employee services and project grant administration and accounting are eligible costs, and page 50 of the LWCF guide can be referenced for more guidance related to that. Well, and then Kevin was asking, did I miss a map showing representatives for areas and counties? We've uploaded the link earlier, but we can drop it in the chat again. It's set up as a table where the list of the counties is on the far left and the list of the project officer for that county is on the far right. We'll get that in the chat really quick for you. Let's see. Okay, there you go. And so we're going to be in the blue column on that page. All right. Well, I think I'll hand it off now to Lydia to take us through checklist item 12 and 13.
All right, thanks, Katie. All right, checklist items 12 and 13 for acquisition projects on page 43 covers general information about acquisition projects. Acquisitions can be by fee simple title or permanent easement from a landowner who is eligible to apply for funding from this program. For example, a permanent easement from a state agency to a city or county would be allowed. However, a permanent easement from a private landowner to a city or county is not eligible. A private landowner is not an eligible applicant to the LWCF program. Please pay attention to the requirements regarding special uses of acquired property, such as timber management, grazing, and conservation or preservation of natural resources. These must be secondary uses. Recreation must be named as the primary use. Agricultural use is not allowed. Rights held by other parties must be identified in the application, on the LWCF boundary map, and during the post-selection federal requirements process. There are several ineligible acquisition project examples included at the bottom of page 43 in the guide. For example, facilities that will not be used to support outdoor recreation, such as museums or hotels, are not eligible as part of the acquisition property. Starting on page 44, we have some acquisition-only checklist items. Checklist item number 12, public use plan, on page 44. If a parcel to be purchased includes existing indoor structures, describe each one and the planned use. Be sure to include the square footage of the structure. Explain if the structures will be demolished to create a park or open space. If the structures will not be demolished, describe the proposed use for them. Note that LWCF funding may only be used to acquire a structure if it will be used to support or is necessary to achieve the outdoor recreation goal for the site. For instance, a residence that will be turned into a visitor center can be included in the value of the parcel. If the structure will be demolished, the appraised value of the structure needs to be excluded from the grant. Consultation with OGALs regarding the eligibility of structures for acquisition is highly encouraged prior to application submission. Explain if the acquisition parcel or parcels will require development to make the parcels usable by the public. If development is not necessary, also provide an explanation. If development is necessary, provide responses to questions 3A through D. An acquisition must result in a new outdoor recreation opportunity for public use in perpetuity. Only a proposal that creates a fully usable recreation opportunity that is open to the public immediately upon close of escrow or within 3 years after the completion of the acquisition will be eligible. If planned development for public outdoor recreation will be delayed up to 3 years from the date of acquisition, please answer questions 4A through E on pages 44 and 45. All right, moving on to checklist item number 13, willing seller letter on page 45 of the guide. This item is also required for acquisitions only. So for checklist item number 13, provide a letter showing the landowner, the seller, is willing to sell the property to your agency at a price not to exceed the UASFLA appraised fair market value price. The willing seller letter can include a provision for the agreement to be null and void if the project does not receive funding. So we'll pause here to see if we have any questions in the chat. So Lauren is asking if a local state park district was to acquire a property from a private landowner, would state parks be eligible for funding? Yes. There's some slightly different, but is that Sochi eligible? Yeah, go ahead, Kitty Free.
I guess my question, Lauren, would be, is this Department of Parks and Recreation, like California State Parks, or is this a different agency? Because um
Yeah,
okay,
it's state park.
so the if it's a state park project, then you would go through the LWCF state agency application, which is typically due in September of each year. So reach out to the project officer in your area, and we will walk you through or provide you the information for how to apply on the state level. But most of this information is applicable for state agency applications as well. So don't worry. This is going to be really helpful when it comes time, but it is a slightly different application.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, I wasn't sure if so to clarify that, is it applicable for them to be applying state parks for the application deadline in August now, or is that September? Is that what you were saying?
So it would be a
That's fine.
separate application process with a separate deadline that I don't want to confirm right now, but if you reach out to your project officer, we can definitely get that to you.
Different. That's why, I mean, and you know what, like Katie said, reach out to the project officer and we can work with you to figure that out in your county where the park is. So, all right. So any more? You're welcome. Okay. So Stephen, what happens in the price paid is higher than the appraisal value and is acquired after we get the grant. So it cannot be higher than the appraised value per Yellow Book. So it can be less, but it can't be more. And then is acquired after we get the grant, is acquired after we get, yes. So when you get your award date, if you are selected, then yeah, you would have your grant performance period to pay for the property. And Sochi, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but so if for instance you have an appraisal and it goes through the process, and of course the price of land in California keeps rising, and let's say you're granted, and then it comes to, okay, now we're ready, and that price pops up, there is something that there are avenues available to you. We can either request an increase or such, but as Lydia has stated, that it must be NPS will only pay for the appraisal value. So it would have to go through that process again.
Yeah, thank you, Sochi. Yeah, so now I would just, yeah, so all right. Thank you. Okay, so can the city, Angela's asking if the city can pay the difference. If they no, again, that goes back to, it has to be what the Yellow Book appraisal value is at the market at that time that you're paying for it. And that's what you're going to submit with your application for the amount that it's going to cost to purchase the land. Okay. All right. Moving on to checklist items number 14 and 15, development projects. These checklist items that follow are for development projects only. First, we're going to do checklist item number 14, land tenure requirement, which is found on page 46 in your guide. For development projects, the project land must be owned by the applicant at the time of application. You're going to need to provide a property report, title report, parcel report, where the project development will take place to prove ownership. The report needs to include the parcel number or APN, owner's name, acreage, and a map of the parcel. And you can use a tool like Parcel Quest to pull these reports, or work with your county's assessor's office, and they should be able to pull these reports for you. Checklist item number 15 is the concept level site plan. That is also found on page 46 in your guide. You're going to provide a drawing showing where the recreation features and major support amenities listed in the project summary and budget narrative will be located in the park. The name of each recreation feature and major support amenity on the site plan needs to exactly match the name of that feature or amenity under category 9 in the budget narrative. We understand that the locations of the amenities may change, particularly if the project has not finished the planning stages yet. That is okay. We will be checking that all items listed in category 9 on the budget narrative do appear on the site plan. For items that appear throughout the park, be sure they do indeed appear throughout the park on the site plan. If there are existing features in the park already, include those on the site plan, but please differentiate in the legend which elements are new or proposed through this LWCF project and which are existing. We recommend using different colors, shadings, or symbols to clearly differentiate new from existing features. If the project scope includes eligible buildings, such as a visitor center or a pool house, note the function and the building's approximate total square footage, but you do not note square footage of restroom only buildings. Indicate or describe where and how the public will access the park and where parking is currently located or will be located. So this now concludes the requirements for the applications that are due August 5th. But we do want to bring attention to the next few pages in the guide, which discuss the post-selection federal requirements stage of the application process. But first, let's check and see if we have questions. And it looks like we do not. So then I am going to let Katie Freeling discuss post-selection federal requirements.
Thank you, Lydia. All right. So beginning on page 47 of the application guide, this section discusses application items that will only be completed by applicants OGAL selects to move forward in the application process. However, we believe it's helpful for all applicants to be aware of what the next steps will be in the federal application process. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 is a process that determines whether there will be any effect on historic properties caused by the proposed project. Completing the Section 106 process can be a 6-month to 1 year or even longer process, especially for development projects involving ground disturbances. It can also be very costly, and applicants are encouraged to include the cost of completing Section 106 as a pre-award planning cost in their budget narrative. Section 106 is required to be complete before the grantee may proceed with the acquisition or development of land using LWCF funds and match. LWCF projects are also subject to additional environmental review known as NEPA. While a more general study may be sufficient for CEQA, it is not necessarily sufficient for NEPA. NEPA requires a site-specific environmental review. So this answers the question that was asked earlier, is NEPA required for LWCF projects? It's not required to be complete at time of application, but it will be required if the project is selected to move forward. Projects that are selected to complete these post-selection federal requirements will have the support of the OGAL's NPS unit Section 106 specialist and environmental scientist to complete these requirements. For more information on these requirements, you can visit the LWCF post-selection federal requirements webpage, which we have posted in the chat for you. Once your post-selection federal requirements are complete, an NPS issues a notice of award Our office will send out the grant contract for your office to review and sign. We'll host an administration workshop with your agency to go over the requirements of the program and answer any questions you might have. Additionally, the Grant Administration tab on our website includes an administration guide that explains how funding is administered throughout the program and what needs to be turned in with reimbursement requests. Once complete, LWCF projects are subject to post-completion stewardship requirements in perpetuity. These include LWCF signage at the park, operation, maintenance, and public access. Our office will complete periodic compliance site inspections every 5 years to ensure project sites remain compliant. For more information, visit the Post-Completion Stewardship tab on the LWCF webpage. And now we'll check out any questions we haven't addressed yet. So I see Kimberly has asked, is there a tool to help estimate the cost to meet NEPA requirements? I'm going to tag in our environmental scientist, Kristen, for this one.
Hi. So for NEPA, unfortunately, you don't have anything like that at this time. My suggestions would be if you're in an environmentally sensitive area near a river or near open land that is currently undeveloped, I would maybe look into how much a biological consultant is if a biological report has not been prepared yet. Other than that, if your project is not significant or controversial, the biological report and any assistance from biological consultants are the only things that I can think of for NEPA.
Thank you, Kristen. And similar to Section 106, NEPA costs can be worked into the budget as a pre-award cost. So you can be reimbursed for those costs. Any other questions? Stephen asked, so are both LWCF and ORLIP grant funds become effective on average about 2 to 3 years after awarded? That is a estimated timeline. And if they're very intensive, it could be extended even longer, but it's a good estimate, Stephen. And just to clarify, in reading your question, you say 2 to 3 years after awarded. I'd like to specify that the notice of award and grant contract are usually issued 2 to 3 years after application, not after the grant is officially awarded by NPS. Any other questions? All right, well, feel free to keep putting questions in the chat, but I am going to turn it over to Sochi to close us out.
All right. So I hope that helped answer a lot of your questions. This was a pretty comprehensive webinar, so I really do appreciate everyone sticking around as long as they have for all this. That was the review of the LWCF application guide. Let's go ahead and check out the timeline before we end this webinar, however. All right, so applications are due before 5 p.m. on August 5th, 2025. Again, a friendly reminder, start entering those applications in Submittable as soon as you can. After the deadline, OGAL staff may work with applicants individually on any incomplete checklist items and for any clarifications needed that are outside of the project selection criteria. So you may recall Katie Freeling mentioning that there are placeholders that you can insert there. Applications that are selected to move forward will be announced in the winter of 2026 and will receive additional training on the post-selection federal requirements shortly after those announcements. And we hope to move forward with projects to NPS between July and December of 2026. Once submitted to NPS, it typically takes them about 30 to 90 days to review. And please remember to reach out to your NPS grant project officer with any of your questions. We are all very happy to help you. Okay, and then one last thing I'd like to mention. We have another grant opportunity. You may have heard us bring it up a couple times. Consider applying for the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program, ORLUP. This is a federal program. It's also ran by NPS, and it funds the creation of new parks or substantial renovations to parks in economically disadvantaged cities or towns of at least 25,000 people. We are hosting separate ORLUP application workshops. So if you haven't already attended, please register. You can visit our website to find the links to the right schedule that fits you. And of course, pre-applications are due to our office by March 11th for the ORLUP competitive projects. And yeah, we should have them over to NPS by June 1st. Again, we have another workshop for the ORLUP grant opportunities. Are there any final questions before we close out? All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. We are really excited for the LWCF cycle to go through. We are looking forward to seeing your applications, and let's go build some parks. Thank you, everyone.